Welcome to Tavern Talk. Today we're in Oakendale going over to the Leaping Wolf Tavern, where we'll be discussing lovable characters and how to keep your character from being killed by your DM.
A very important consideration.
I'm Trevor Lancaster.
And I'm Tim Gibbons.
We'll be your, bar friends for the evening.
Bar friends or bar flies?
Well, a little of both, a little of this, a little of that. Bit of column A, bit of column B.
Dwarven whiskey on the rocks.
Dwarven whiskey.
All right.
It's the only thing that's going to get us through this night. The Leaping Wolf Tavern is in the middle of the Peat Bog Swamp. Oakendale is a lovely place with a small swamp ringing around the outside. Most of the orcs work there gathering wreaths, no less, fighting off crocodiles, and spend the rest of their sweaty work afternoon in this tavern. I am human, and they don't like me.
I am elf, and I am not afraid.
Good for you.
All right, so the topic of conversation is creating a player character, and not just creating a character random, but rather some of the things you want to keep in mind when creating a character, such as how it fits into the world, how it fits with the party, how it fits with the story arc that the Dungeon Master has created.
So that sounds like a lot of things. But when you kind of break it down into how you're going to set up your character, first you just kind of roll it out. Most of the time, if you can, and if you have enough time, sitting down with your DM and rolling out your character, and then having him explain the world and possibly working a little bit of the world that you guys are going to be playing in into the background, which helps a lot with homebrew games, not too much with league games. So we're mostly going to be talking about homebrew games here, because league games you could really throw just about anything in there, and those guys have run so many quests that it's kind of hard to get them to endear to anything.
Pretty much. So,
however, sometimes there are those cocky, wonderful DMs out there that it doesn't affect at all, and they love you regardless, and your blind horse.
The blind horse.
I love that horse.
With blind sense and advanced combat training.
It was a great horse.
His samurai rider couldn't do jack.
No, he couldn't hit worth a darn, but that horse rode in and clobbered the competition.
Yes.
So much so that if I could pick between the character and the horse, I would have continued the adventure with the horse.
And his devout belief in the entire Dwarven pantheon.
Oh, man, he was devout to that. Should have seen the way his face lit up when we found that blanket. Oh.
So, yes, quirky characters. Always a plus, but they still need to be able to function in the world. Or at the very least, they need to throw down some hurt so that the party will put up with their quirks.
Yes, it's kind of one of those things of you can build an optimized character, but then they become basically just the secret weapon of the party, and then they are relegated to being damage dealer only. Whereas if you build a character that works really well with the party, even if they're like a mischievous prankster or a rather unapproachable yet lovable healer, then, you can still be optimized and have a good character. But if you are a bad character and unoptimized, don't be surprised when you accidentally get left to a lich. It's destroying a village.
Pretty much, they trip you and run.
Yeah. Now, on that note, as a player, regardless of how much you actually hate the other player characters at the table, you should always try and find a way to help your fellow player.
Being a team player. And this is important because your character might be one of these chaotic evil, lawful evil, or just completely out for his or her own profit or gain. That's totally cool. But even that type of a character can be a team player. It's all about finding the motivation. Characters are in a dungeon. Your character happens to be the tank of the group. He needs to go in and start dealing some damage. how do you motivate your character to do this? Okay, you look at it. What is it? Is he going for the treasure? Is maybe he's an orc who needs to face down battle, or a dwarf that needs to face down battle. If he runs away, he loses face. There's always ways you can find to make your character a team player, or at the very least, a begrudging team player.
And on the same note, there's always ways to talk your battle-crazed character out of a fight. Though you may have like a hardened orc, seasoned and ready for battle, you should really look at it as though he is adventuring with a group of sword friends. They are there to aid him in his journey. If he charges in alone, it's as though he abandoned his own group in order to chase down some other form of glory, which is dishonorable amongst all warriors. Then, you can even take it to they ran away, and it's a tactical retreat. Giving yourself an excuse to let the character details you made for your character allow him to do things that are tactical and helpful to the group instead of harming, such as, for example, when your party realizes there's a dragon coming over the next ridge, and they've been fighting all day against this horde of undead. They turn to fall back and find shelter so that they can get a long rest. And you turn to them, the barbarian that you are, relentless and unending in rage, still maximum hit points, and say, "No, I will take the next foe coming over the mountain ridge." They're probably going to leave you there. And if they don't, you're all probably going to die to that dragon, because with that many undead and with as many wasted spell slots as it is, your healer is probably out and you're not considering the group. Instead, it should be more like, "Yes, we will fall back and regroup and take victory for honor." And, kind of work it that way.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you have... Well, we could go on about your character, Hojo Montgomery.
That is a whole podcast all in its own. Poor Hojo.
But speaking of supporting the group, you have the character. He's a life domain cleric. He has a hard time forming connections because of his background, but at the same time, he's the quintessential soldier that leaves no one behind, as long as they're breathing.
Even if they're not breathing, he doesn't like to leave a corpse behind either.
Right, because that's just one more undead that he has to face the next day.
Exactly that. He likes his burial rituals and he likes his ceremonies.
So, in other words, you can always find a way to make your player or your PC a team player, and you can always find a way to never split the party. Big emphasis on that. Splitting the party, always a bad idea. Always.
It is true that splitting the party is very seldom a good idea, and always goes awry in some spectacular form or another, but it's really hard on your DM, which forces them to either play really aggressively or really loosely, where an entire group in your session will get maybe one or two rolls because they're doing something out of combat, and suddenly the other group gets into combat. And you're basically sitting at the table waiting for their combat to end so that the group that went over into the left corridor can find something for them to do outside of just sit there, wait, or retcon and turn around and make dashes back, which at most times they make it there just as the final blow is dropped.
Right, so splitting the party not only does it give your DM a wonderful method to obliterate the party, it can also be unfair to your fellow players.
Now, I had an instance once where splitting the party was actually very advantageous for the group. They were working their way through this catacomb underground, and I had laid out the map, and they had gotten a good sight of the map. And oh shoot, I forget his name, but he was playing a rogue at the time. He spotted this loose brick that led to an escape hatch that went around to where the main bad guy was. So him and the ranger popped down that escape and went around for the final encounter, where everybody situated outside the main room as they went back and backtracked around, splitting up so that they could bust in through the front door and break in through this secret passageway and then have this two-way assault on him, gaining that flanking damage, which is an optional rule in 5e, which I normally always throw in. But in 3.5, which that was what we were playing at the time, it was something you always sought for, and it was gold.
Well, again, that splitting of the party is a little bit different because at that point it's a concerted effort. You're splitting the party to come in on two separate waves, so that both sets of the party engage in the same combat. So that falls under more just smart tactics, as opposed to, oh, well, one group's going to go off to this side of the dungeon, the other group's going to go off to this side of the dungeon. One group runs into an army of undead, the other group finds a giant rat.
No, that's... There's tactical moments to split the party, and then there's times when you just never split the party.
Right.
And then there's times when you guys all get stranded at different taverns for some outlandish drinking thing that you went on that night.
That was an interesting campaign. But
it was a lot of fun.
Anyway, so working with your Dungeon Master for PCs, you want to create a character with an eye to how it's going to fit into your Dungeon Master's world. I liked how one fella said it, that the Dungeon Master has a lot of responsibilities similar to like an author. They're creating a world that you then get a character to go into. And your character gets basically to play in this world. But your character needs to have a story or a hook that allows him to function in this world and function believably. And if you can give him especially a hook that this is the thing that's drawn this character into adventuring. Maybe your character is, okay, like maybe you take the Outlander background. Your character prefers to be alone. He doesn't like being around people. But he's finally reached the point where maybe game has become scarce. Maybe he's just tired of eating rabbits and squirrels for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and he decides, maybe if I go pick up some bounties, get a little bit of gold, maybe I can have myself a nice steak sometime. And so he goes in, maybe hooks up with a couple other players, and his main motivation is just, he's tired of just eating plain food that he can catch. He wants to live a little bit of the high life, and that's his motivation for adventuring. Then you can start looking at, okay, maybe he starts over time forming attachments to the character. Maybe he finds a hook, maybe like a long-lost family relative or something like that. So always be thinking about, okay, what is motivating your character to adventure? Mm-hmm. Not just what is, you're just creating a character, just throwing him into this world. Yeah, I mean, you can play it that way, but a character is always so much more fun, both for the player and the Dungeon Master, if they have a reason why they're adventuring. And then as a Dungeon Master, you can set up some fun scenarios to kind of test this, to maybe bring out different aspects of the personality, because now you know what the motivation is. Now you can set some adventures up that will help deepen the character for the player.
Oh, yeah, no, you can... The great thing about talking to your Dungeon Master about your character's reason for adventuring and their backstory and situations like that is occasionally, as you're talking it out, the Dungeon Master might have a stroke of genius and be like, oh my gosh, I had this encounter planned for last week, but you're in a perfect situation to run into your long-lost Uncle Frank, who ran off with your family's fortune, and track him down.
Right?
And then it's up to and then the Dungeon Master will either happily put together an encounter where you're chasing your Uncle Frank through a town, or kind of set it up so that it's something that the entire party gets invested in and deepens the understanding of your player character, but it also increases the fondness that the DM has for your character, which can keep him alive in a lot of different scenarios.
Exactly. Characters that the DM loves have a higher survivability rate.
And that's mainly because, as a DM, we hate to see those characters die.
Right? They make it... I mean, even if you have a character that comes in and just completely brutalizes all the monsters that you set up for him. And again, I'm speaking of Hojo. But just completely brutalizes the monsters. But the character is just, he has such a wonderful background, such a wonderful story arc behind him that you honestly don't mind, because you almost love seeing this character beat up all these monsters that you set in front of him, because he just does it with so much style and class. And when I say style and class, I'm not talking about being over the top and goofy. You know, there's a difference between being classy, there's a difference between having style, and a difference between being goofy just for the sake of being goofy.
Yes, no, and then that's another thing is being a goofball can be really good, but overdoing it and interrupting party members when they're attempting to do something, or when the DM's trying to lay down a situation or a scenario, not only slows down the entire thing, but also interrupts whatever it was they're doing. And that's general table setup, but also reflecting that in your character. Don't let them become wacky to a point to where the entire party can't stand them.
Right. But no, so having like a smart mouth character that maybe after he scores a hit or a critical hit, or he manages to nat 20 something or do something brilliant, and he just comes off with this great one-liner, or maybe he does a little victory dance or something like that. You know, little quirks and fun things can be fun, but especially when your character, you have your character do something that interrupts the DM, because there's many times where when you come into a situation, whether it's a tavern, whether it's a dungeon, whether it's a town, the DM's going to be describing things to you. And oftentimes as DMs, we put in little clues as to what you might want to look for as you're coming in. Maybe we point out a specific piece of architecture. Maybe we point out an interesting group of figures hanging out by the gate, or in the corner of a tavern. If your character instantly interrupts the DM and starts doing something goofy just for the sake of being goofy, one, you're throwing the dungeon master off, but even more important, you are depriving the party of those clues that they need to make or to further the adventure, and you could possibly kill the whole party because you didn't allow the dungeon master to finish, in which case you would have gotten a sneaky suspicion that the stranger in the next booth is actually a polymorphed ancient gold dragon who doesn't like lippy gnomes.
That happens a lot more than you think.
It does. It very well does.
But then that also leads to the getting to know your DM. Now, getting a party together to actually go out and play D&D and working with your DM to get your character set up is really great. But if you know your DM on like a friend-to-friend basis, or like if you just see him once a week, kind of, if you're planning on going on a long campaign, kind of pay a little bit of attention to when he's laying down hints. Because I'm a terrible person about actually putting in when I'm hinting at something. I always leave it very mysterious and subtitled throughout the backgrounds of everything, which that's my flaw.
But, well, I mean, prime example are Unleashing the Lich with the Curse of Solomon.
Now that was interesting. One of my players came to me and was setting it up, and he's like, okay, so all of my characters have been really bland. I want a character with like a hook. I want him to be cursed, but have this like greed curse. And then when he like gets a certain amount of gold, he turns into like some sort of undead monster thing. And I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, so we'll make it really scary to like entice the characters to not let him become too greedy or take too much out of a dragon hold. So I was like, all right, so we'll hint at him turning into a lich. And, well, I wasn't really paying close attention about the 4th or 5th session in, and this was... they had made it to this island, and they started collecting large amounts of gold. And the party was having a moment of just chatter back and forth while he's going through the background and what would happen if he got too much gold one night while they're on the ship getting to this island.
And we missed some important clues.
Missed a lot of really important stuff, and they got to the island and slowly started making a good amount of gold. As we were working through, and Matt's his character was a bard, and started singing for local groups and just rolling high. He got about 100 gold pieces by the time he was done. And he looks at me and he's like, hey, what was that gold cap mark that we set up? And I was like, oh yeah, no, it was like 30,000. And he's like, I'm 5 gold away. And I have one more performance to put on. And I was like, oh no. So it's right at that moment that I started laying down extra hints to the party. You know,
and we weren't picking them up.
Oh no. Brought him over and they're like, you notice as you're passing by your companion, his skin starting to pull in on itself. His eyes are getting this strange, almost goldish flickering, and his nails and his fingers seem to almost be growing longer. And they're like, oh, huh, that's weird.
Yeah, guilty. Guilty as charged.
And then continue on, and as you guys are getting ready to leave. Now, I should throw in a little bit more to state that the area that they were in, the people of that area had trapped dragon turtles and had been siphoning off their life force to create a magical flow throughout the town that they were harnessing for their own usage, you know, just to make this town heavily magic central. There's a few locations set throughout the town where you can access this flow of magic. And one of which was the very tavern they were performing in. And it was kind of sad to me, and I was like, you could try and resist this and not go in for the performance. And he's like, no, put me a DC and I'll roll against it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I rolled a D20 just to throw in a DC, and it landed on 10, and I'm like, yeah, he can do this. And he rolls a natural 1 to resist this urge to play and make gold. Well, needless to say, none of the other characters were savvy to what was going on, and they were just trying to get back with their own findings and things that they had grabbed from the area. When he finally turned into this lich, and this monster of a lich, I set him up. Okay, I didn't set him up as a monster originally. I was going to have him come in as a lich with 0 spell slots available to it. Well, the fountain and the way I had it set up was so that it would regenerate spell slots, and I had planned an encounter in this area where utilizing that fountain to regenerate spell slots for a rather long haul campaign was going to be around the corner. So the lich jumped into the magic sludge, soaking it up and turning the entire town 1 bar at a time. He slowly became way too powerful for any of the NPCs to withstand, and any of the player characters to take on. So they all made a beeline towards the ship and took off for the planar portal that they came into this area on. And then I was like, oh man, okay, I need to figure out how long it's going to take him to give chase, because he was actually looking for vengeance on his party slightly.
Well, yeah, we did just let him turn into a lich.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So that is always an important thing. Just quick side note. Don't abandon your party members. You never know when one of them's cursed with the Curse of Solomon.
That's what we called it.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. I remember, too, because the highest level character was actually, I think it was my Warlock, 8th level.
Yeah.
And not even close to being take this on. So, as a way to give our group a chance of survival, you basically said, okay, we're going to do a one night where the town guard comes in and tries to stop this lich. We all rolled out and made up level 20 characters, and we got our butts handed to us.
Because it was that bad.
Yes.
Now, I may have made it a little bit worse because I was actually a little sad to see that his character got turned into the Lich. And, and everybody was willing to leave him there. So I was like, we'll make this scary. And that's another thing, is sometimes your DMs can have a little bit of a vengeance spike when you neglect another character.
Just a little?
Just a smidge. Just a smidge. Really a smidge.
But that smidge means the difference between a challenge rating 10 and a challenge rating 50.
It was like a 24.
Level 8, man. Level 8.
I mean, you were basically just fighting Vecna.
Oh, Lord. That was bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, a level 20 fighter, a level 20 sorcerer. We had a ranger and a wizard. 4 level 20s.
And 1 cleric.
And 1 cleric. Level 20.
Yep.
Against this Uberlich and his ungodly swarm of Salacriums. Yes. And we were slaughtered.
Yeah.
We kept the fight going long enough that the ship with our original characters was able to get away, but we were slaughtered.
And he's going to be a reoccurring villain for Endgame content later on, so...
Yes. Remember this. The wrath of your DM is powerful and all-consuming.
This is very true, especially in a homebrew game. And even more so sometimes in league games. Because sometimes those DMs can have a really crappy week and come in just wanting to kill everyone at the table.
And it doesn't help if the characters are abandoning party members or interrupting the DM while he's talking. The DM might decide to take your character out just so that he can finish a complete thought.
Or refuses to share chips.
Yes.
If you are eating chips, share your chips.
Bribery is not only wrong, it's absolutely necessary.
Very much so.
Okay, so we've gotten adventuring hooks. We've gotten don't split the party, don't abandon party members. Mm-hmm. Keep your characters, have fun with the characters. The big thing. I mean, we talk about evil DMs and stuff. So, little tongue-in-cheek, just a little. Actually, no, we're deadly serious about this, but we want you to feel safe coming to the table. So, biggest thing is, you're coming to have fun at a D&D session. That should be your whole point. Your point isn't about how am I going to mess with the party? How am I going to mess with the other characters or steal from the other characters? So it's about having fun. And yes, your character can be totally evil or your character can be a total thief. That's fun. Yeah. If you want to play it that way. But when your whole evening is focused on messing with the party, or trying to provoke fights between you and party members. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, player versus player. If a succubus has managed to charm one of your party members and has turned your barbarian orc into your own personal bodyguard, okay, that's acceptable player versus player fighting. If you're just turning on each other just for the sake of turning on each other, not even in keeping with your character, that's not cool.
Yeah, no, that's going to bite you in the end, and it's going to ruin everybody else's night.
Yeah. Because invariably it means characters die. Well, now they have to be either taken to clerics, or maybe they die completely, and now the player has to re-roll and create a brand new character because your character's just wiped him out for no reason.
And all of a sudden, Jim the Bard becomes a giant melted cross in the middle of town square.
Yes. So, keep it friendly. Keep it professional.
Keep it safe. Keep it secret.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get into too much trouble with this. Okay.
Something we wanted to touch base on a little bit more was the reason that your character's out and adventuring. We basically said, find a reason. But sometimes it's a little easier said than done.
Right.
You know, it'd be like, find a reason for you to be an adventurer and be out in the world and not just stay at this local tavern where you like to sulk and the barmaid listens to all of your problems. Or...
I have not been to this tavern.
You've not been to this tavern?
I have not been to this tavern.
Oh, well, you got to go to the Drunken Orc.
Oh.
Maybe next week.
I like this plan.
But the reason that you could be out adventuring could be hundreds of thousands of things. It can't, I mean, don't make it just one reason. Don't make it I am taking the hobbits to Isengard, and then I don't know what I'm doing with myself afterwards. Maybe I'll become a king. Because that only gives you one major quest to go on and one main quest line that you're doing. Make it multiple things. Like, I need to find a way to extend my father's life because he is a human and my mother is an elf and I'm a half-elf. And she just wants to spend more days with him. But at the same time, I want to see the world, adventure, and meet new friends and people. And maybe strengthen myself a bit more.
Maybe you're on a quest, you've got family inheritance, but your family's fortune is gone. So in addition to both seeking out information on your family's inheritance, which is pretty much just a strange little box in a language that you have absolutely no knowledge of, you also decide that you want to live a comfortable life, but not with a boring 9-to-5 job. No. Mm-hmm. You want to get rich, and you want to take a dragon horde and live high off the hog like you were used to as a child. So having a couple of different hooks, a couple of different motivations.
Yeah.
Good way to keep your character in the adventuring mode.
Well, it makes it so that way you have a reason that, yeah, I can put this on the back burner for now. And go investigate that weird cursed tomb that everybody's so into at the moment. But at the same time, not be like, no, my one reason in life is to slay goblins. And only slay goblins. And it's like, so we're kind of going to fight some gnolls that are killing a nearby town. Will there be goblins? No. I'm gonna go look for goblins.
And again, splitting the party.
And that's one of those things. Or, I've slayed every goblin in the world. There is no more goblins left. There is no more goblins left. I retire. It's like, well, you've completed the one thing that your character wanted to do, and now he's a drunkard in a tavern not doing anything. So, not very adventurous and not a very long campaign. Despite what you may think, killing all of the goblins in the world, when you're talking about a world of magic, doesn't take as long as you would want it to.
Right. So having multiple hooks, I think also keeping aspects of your character a little bit on the open side. Mm-hmm. It really helps with the DM, especially later in the campaign, as your character becomes more fleshed out, and especially talk with your DM about it too. Is be like, okay, maybe I have this family relationship. I've had it. My character's had it for the last few sessions, but haven't really done anything with it. Well, now you're up to level 10. Now maybe something you have an estranged, your character has an estranged sister or an estranged father, estranged relative. Suddenly, relative sends them a message out of the blue. Boom, you got your next plot hook. You've got maybe the next few sessions of adventuring, taking down baddies, maybe mending a family relationship, and kumbaya moments all around.
Now say you don't have any family. You are an orphan who's been from foster home to foster home. Or you were abandoned on the side of the road and raised by ocelots. You can have more of a point to your character outside of the one thing they want. Like, I just want to see the world now. Or, I'm looking to find a new family. But I'm not making that fully aware to everyone else.
Or maybe ocelots are now an endangered species and you want to go out and make the world safe for them again.
That too. Maybe you need to take over a large tri-state area in order to do so.
Stranger things have happened in a DM session. I mean, oh Lord, like my first character that... my start on D&D was with Trevor as my DM. First character starts out. He's this dwarf. For whatever reason, I gave him a bum leg. So instead of having a 25-foot movement speed, he has a 20-foot movement speed. Coming in off the wild, he's just tired of living out on his own, decides to get himself a little gold. Over time, working with Trevor on the character, eventually my character, whose name was Gimpy, his name becomes Gimpleton Goldenchin. And because I worked with Trevor, and Trevor had some ideas for my character, and I was new at this, so I was like, okay, let's try this. In the end, Gimpleton Goldenchin goes from just being this dwarf with a gimp to now leading an entire dwarven army to take back his family's mind that has been taken over by necromancers, which leads them to a vicious fight, both at the walls of the mind, then through the bowels of the mind, and then finally to a planar portal, which transports us to hell. I should specify, it first transported a sick cow strapped with an ungodly amount of explosives through the portal first. And then we went to hell.
Yeah.
Literally. So working with your DM, even a simple character can become fun. We ended up calling that the Moo Boom.
Yeah, they ended up calling that the Moo Boom. And it wasn't the first time, nor was it the last time, that they went into a town, bought a keg of gunpowder, strapped it to the back of a cow, and marched it into combat.
Actually, my very first night with that character, that was what we did, is we decided that we were going after a basilisk. We were like, what, 3rd level or something?
Oh, yeah, no, you guys were way under level.
We were way under level going after a basilisk. So we decide, we're going to buy ourselves a sick cow. We're going to strap it full of explosives and send it down the tunnel into the basilisk's lair. Ended up blowing up a bunch of bats. Didn't get the basilisk. The wyvern, though, we got.
Oh, that poor wyvern.
Yes, so we have a cow. Strapped not only with kegs of powder. My character by this time has a handheld ballista with explosive bolts. We have the explosive bolts rigged, pointing upwards so that the wyvern will trigger it when he goes for the cow. And then our other fellow DM, Kenny.
Yeah, who was playing as a character at that time.
Who was playing as a character. This was Trevor's campaign. Creates 3 udder bombs. Bombs in the shape of cow udders that are now strung under this cow. All I can think is that the wyvern must have had a very poor perception check to realize that this cow did not look natural.
The wyvern was hungry. It didn't really care what the cow looked like. It just thought it was easy prey. It was not easy prey.
Pretty much left a crater in the ground, blood mist all over the place, and the wyvern was so badly damaged that a single shot from my character's handheld ballista ended it.
Oh, man. That was a lot of fun and just so terrible at the same time.
And honestly, having been behind the screen as a DM now, you kind of, as a dungeon master, really love those moments when a character comes up with something so outlandish to take out an enemy, and they roll so good to do it.
Oh, yes. No, and something we'll probably touch base on in the future. Talk with your DM and see how they feel about the rule of cool. And don't try and over-exploit it, but know that it's there, and realize that either they'll work with you if something sounds like it's going to be epic, or they'll only abide by the rules if you're trying to put something together, in which case you've got to be a little bit more clever to have something go off in that sort of fashion.
Yes. So, like, in our example, the Moo Boom, we were very creative in figuring out and very specific in how the explosives were going to go off. In the case of the wyvern, cow strapped with explosives. The explosives are all fitted together so that when the wyvern hits the explosive arrows, it sets the whole thing off.
No.
Or the cow we send into the Bliss to go after the Basilisk. Lit the fuse, sent the cow in.
The cow you pushed through the portal to get to the hell.
We lit the fuse, set that cow through, and then we threw... How many rats strapped with explosives did we throw through that portal after that?
I think you guys were able to capture like 15 or 16, and you were able to put a pound of powder on each and send them through.
And then we marched our forces through, not realizing how badly we had depleted the portal, so we only got a small crew of the actual army through.
As they made it to the other side, not only was there a crater on the other side that had broken through to the floor under it, but the runes that were keeping this portal open were slowly starting to crumble, and as they were marching over it, it finally finished them off and cut off the portal.
Yes.
Trapping them in the abyss.
Which wasn't too bad, because then we captured the hell ship that Kenny's character attuned to and was able to get us out of hell once we finished killing the demon. Though that demon fight was bad.
Oh, I thought you guys did pretty good.
Yeah, we did pretty good, but half our party was making death saving throws at the very end. We're having to grab them and trying to drag them out of this lava fire that's starting to pour down.
Oh, man.
We managed to defeat it. All three of our paladins bought it, but we managed to defeat it.
Yep. But, in the end... in the end, that gnome had a song to sing at all the taverns.
Did he not, though? Did he not? Yes. Oh. And I think our cue to wrap it up has just walked in the door. This is Timothy Gibbons, signing off from the Leaping Wolf.
And this is Trevor Lancaster. If you enjoyed this, let us know. If you had any critiques or any thoughts on how to make this podcast a little bit more listenable to, that's put it down. And I think podcasts have a thing where you can send messages, or no, or maybe yes. I'm getting a nod, so I'm assuming yes. We don't really know what we're doing, and man, those orcs look pissed.
Yes. Roll a d20 fast.
It's a 17. Run!